The devil visits Washington. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has come for the first time since 2015 to the Capitol. But this is the first time the United States has accepted a war criminal as labeled by the International Criminal Courts. Now, currently, the present application for arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, along with Hamas leaders Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Deif, and Ismail Haniyeh. The Office of the Prosecutor alleged the crimes against humanity and war crimes starting on October 7th of 2023, in which extermination, murder, rape, and other sexual violence, hostage taking, and the acts of torture in the context of captivity, among others. But that didn't stop this war criminal from coming to the United States and pleading with the country to provide it with the backing that it needs to destroy not just Hamas, but also every single Palestinian in Gaza. And currently, every single Palestinian in Gaza is being forced to leave their own country under threats of death and violence. So one must ask, why does the United States Congress accept into their arms this dastardly, evil man into the country and into the most sensitive area of government? It's because we have a bunch of sellouts. Now they're Republicans and Democrats both. As I keep telling you, there is no left and right. But let's see what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say while he was on the floor.
Thank you. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Senator Ben Cardin, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Senators, members of Congress, distinguished guests. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the profound honor of addressing this great citadel of democracy for the fourth time. We meet today at a crossroads of history. Our world is in upheaval. In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends.
Years ago, when he went before the Senate Select Committee and basically lied about Iraq, now it's Iran that is the great evil. It doesn't matter what country it is. It's all the countries that are basically against the Gulf and Israel. Tentatively, there's a relationship between Saudi Arabia and the Gulf and Israel, but that too will break down in time soon. As for now, it's all the enemies of the Oded Yanon plan, which was a foreign policy plan by Foreign Minister Oded Yanon under the Ariel Sharon administration in Israel. Oded Yanon basically outlined a progress report regarding how Israel can disseminate their enemies, such as Syria, Iraq, and Iran, and Lebanon, all the countries that are Shia dominated. They are the most stringent of the Muslims in the world. In fact, many Arabs countries, such as Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, they're not known for their fighting skill. However, Syria, Lebanon, and Iran basically are known for their fighting skill, the Persians especially. This is the reason why if the United States ever engages war with Iran, it won't be like Iraq. It won't be like Afghanistan. And if it took 20 years to fight against the Taliban, a ragtag bunch that basically used mountain terrain to basically ward off the United States and the Soviet Union. What do you think the Persians are going to do to the United States? Now, the United States may win this war. However, it's going to cost them and cost them dearly. All the wars that we've been in, Syria, Libya, Sudan, Afghanistan, Iraq, twice, cost us trillions. In fact, Afghanistan was a $3 trillion loss. The Taliban took over the country, and now they're stronger than ever. And now they have Al Qaeda in their government. Both groups are going to basically grow even bigger than before because of the U.S. and Israel and the Saudi Arabian foreign policy plan, which is an outright disaster. This is the reason why Benjamin Netanyahu is a terrible leader, along with every single U.S. president of the last 25 years. Our allies, Saudi Arabia and Israel, are actually our enemies to the world and enemies to us. Now, I'm not saying the people of these countries. They have nothing to do with the government. However, they do vote, and a lot of them voted against Netanyahu. In fact, tens of thousands took to the streets when he was voted in as the sixth-term prime minister in December of 2023. So this is a problem in the long run because I see far-right advocates basically hitching on this ride to anti-Zionist movement. And they're basically going to label the anti-Zionist movement by default anti-Semites, which is currently happening. And Netanyahu basically mentions this.
This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization. It's a clash between those who glorify death and those who sanctify life. For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together.
As you can see, it doesn't matter, left and right. There is no such thing. It's them versus us, as George Carlin once said. Now, I've been telling you for years now, there is no Democrat Republican Party. There are Democrat and Republican parties. There is a left and right when it comes to cultural issues, Social Security, health care, education, things that take years to get through, to pass a bill in Congress. But when it comes to Israel, there is unanimous agreement between both parties. What does that tell you? When it comes to the Pentagon, there's a unanimous agreement between both parties. And so many of you basically vote and think that you're an advocate for the left and for the right, for progressive values, for conservative values. There is no such thing. There's only human values. We all share a common bond. We're human beings. These people are human beings, but they lost their empathy to replace it with ideology, with greed, with apathy. The most evil people on the face of the earth are right here applauding a war criminal, a man who was wanted by the international criminal courts. None of you said anything when it came to Ukraine and Russia. Sure, Putin is evil, but here's a man who basically is killing his own civilians. His own civilians. And you're worshiping this man. He is murdering tens of thousands. It's estimated anywhere between 60,000 to 200,000 people are dead. We'll probably never know the number because they have razed the ground to its foundations. Gaza City, which housed 1 million people. It no longer exists. Have you ever seen anything like this in the world? 12,000 of them children approximately. He is a mass murderer, and look at these people standing up for him. And anyone who votes this election should be ashamed of themselves. whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, both are Zionist-backed supporters. And as long as you support them with your vote, you are supporting this man to stay as prime minister. But he won't be. And here's the scarier part. The people that are coming after him are far worse than him. And right now, as I predicted several months ago, it seems that the Israeli minister himself, Ben-Gvir, who I call Dracula, is gaining popularity. Cabinet Minister Ben-Gvir. Can you imagine if he was prime minister of Israel? He would kill every single Arab, men, women, children, elderly, it doesn't matter, and it wouldn't stop in Israel. It would go on to Lebanon, it would go on to Syria, and finally to Iran, which would emit World War III.
Because when we stand together, something very simple happens. We win, they lose.
And that's all that matters to this man. We win by any cost. No matter how many people have to die, we will win. The mission will be finished. And we will kill every single Arab if we can to accomplish this mission. And as we kill these people, we'll basically just say they're Hamas supporters. Well, how many Hamas supporters are in Lebanon? How many Hamas supporters are in Syria? How many Hamas supporters are in Iran? You might as well kill them all just in case.
And my friends, I came to assure you today of one thing. We will win.
They'll win with the backing of the United States only. Israel on their own, they'll lose. They couldn't even defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon in 2006. What makes you think they can win? They can't.
Ladies and gentlemen, like December 7th, 1941, and September 11th, 2001, October 7th is a day that will forever live in infamy. It was the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. It began as a perfect day, not a cloud in the sky. Thousands of young Israelis were celebrating at an outdoor music festival. And suddenly, at 6:29 a.m., as children were still sleeping soundly in their beds in the towns and kibbutzim next to Gaza, suddenly heaven turned into hell. 3,000 Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel. They butchered 1,200 people from 41 countries, including 39 Americans. Proportionately, compared to our population size, that's like 20 9/11s in one day. And these monsters, they raped women, they beheaded men, they burnt babies alive.
As you can see, he's still propagating these false claims of burning babies in ovens and whatnot. All these stories about the babies turned out to be false. Even Haaretz, a liberal paper in Israel, basically denounced these stories. Jerusalem Post, even. And just like 9/11, October 7th, the intelligence services of Israel basically were warned that Hamas was basically preparing for an invasion months in advance. Just like with 9/11, where the intelligence services knew that hijackers were inside the United States and were not permitted to share that information. Just like the soldiers, the IDF soldiers who were on the western wall of the Jericho wall where Hamas breached, told their superiors that Hamas was seen planting weapons, digging ditches near the wall. Their superiors told them, forget about it, they're farmers. Israel, just like the United States, needed this attack to overreact, which is what the United States did. In fact, the United States actually killed 1 million people in Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11. They killed over 300,000 in Afghanistan. Most of those people were sent to CIA black sites and then finally to Guantanamo, where a majority of them have been released. In fact, some people in Guantanamo are held without charge indefinitely, thanks to the United States basically circumventing the Geneva Convention for Foreign Combatants. Illegal. And who did that? Bush's White House lawyers, the White House legal counsel. Israel is basically trying to destroy every fabric of Arab society. Why? Because they want every single Israeli back to Israel to do what? Well, according to the Haredi, they want to build the third temple. This will bring about the Mashiach and the end of the world. That's right. Just like evangelical Christians who also believe that every single Israeli needs to go back to Israel, and then the war of Megiddo happens, Christ returns, kills every single Jew and every single body that doesn't believe in the risen Christ. Religious fanatics and secular fanatics working together in racism and religious persecution to destroy their preconceived enemy. Meanwhile, they're destroying themselves. When you kill a person, you don't only kill that person, you kill a part of yourself. And that's why you see this cold stare, these dead eyes, like a doll's eyes, when you stare at the face of evil in Benjamin Netanyahu.
They kill parents in front of their children and children in front of their parents. They dragged 255 people, both living and dead, into the dark dungeons of Gaza. Israel has already brought home 135 of these hostages, including 7 who were freed in daring rescue operations.
Well, it's reported by Israeli press that Israel killed its own hostages. And this came from the Hannibal Directive, which was just released. The Hannibal Directive basically said that any hostage that was taken by Hamas was also to be shot. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Does it even make moral sound sense? Can you imagine a guy takes 3 hostages by gunpoint, and the police in this country basically shoot in the direction of these people, killing everybody? It would be an unmitigated fucking disaster. But according to Benjamin Netanyahu, it's a success. At least we got the hostage taker. The Israeli who is sacrificed, he's sacrificed for the good of the nation because we are getting rid of every single Palestinian. They don't care. This is the most immoral army in the world. They kill their own to achieve an objective. And this is what the United States basically does. They don't care how many American soldiers die in Iraq as long as the mission is finished. Remember when Bush went on top of the ship and basically had a poster sign called Mission Accomplished? What did they accomplish? Iraq went through 2 civil wars, the creation of ISIS, which basically scourged the Arabian Peninsula. And now you have groups like Islamic State and Khorasan in Afghanistan. They're not going away. These groups basically exist, not because they just exist, because they are a response to U.S. and Israeli West foreign policy. You kill my entire family, my livelihood, my farm, everything I had. What do you think I'm going to do? Predictably, they will join the very group that's fighting against you. In the future, in about 10 years' time, I predict that groups like Taliban and Al Qaeda will be bigger and stronger than ever before due to the fact of this disaster in Gaza. We are creating terrorists in the future because once this Cold War period revisitation ends, we can always go right back to the war on terrorism. So, this way, the Pentagon, Israel, and the Gulf can continue to rake in billions and billions of dollars with repetitive wars that continue on and on.
One of those freed hostages, Noor Gamani, is here in the gallery, sitting near my wife, Sarah. On the morning
For the 58th generation, 58. For this people.
On the morning of October 7th, the entire world saw Noah's look of desperation as she was violently abducted to Gaza on the back of a motorcycle. I met Noah's mother, Leora, a few months ago. She was dying of cancer. She said to me, "Prime Minister, I have one final wish. I wish to hug my daughter Noah one last time before I die." 2 months ago, I authorized a breathtaking commando rescue operation. Our special forces, including a heroic officer named Arnon Zmora, who fell in this battle, rescued Noah and 3 other hostages.
While killing your own.
Noah, I think it's one of the most moving things. When Noah was reunited with her mother, Leora, and her mother's last wish came true. Noah, we're so thrilled to have you with us today. Thank you. Many hostage families are also here with us today, including Eliyahu Bibas. Eliyahu Bibas is the grandfather of those 2 beautiful red-headed boys, the Bibas boys, toddlers. And they were taken hostage with their mother and and Eliyahu's son. The entire family was taken hostage. 2 beautiful red-haired children taken hostage.
How many hostages has Israel taken? Imprisoned in their tombs for years and years without charge. Palestinian children tortured, their arms broken with stones. The videos are out there for you to see. And because they're brown, you don't care. Because they're not Israeli. They're not the chosen people. They're terrorists. Look at them living in filth. It's because you keep them that way. And when they fight back, you basically browbeat them and overextend your violence like a master does a slave. And you expect sympathy from the people of the world. Well, it's a growing percentage now. 17 countries, if you ever dare visit, will have you forcibly extradited to the International Criminal Courts at The Hague, where one day I hope you will see the justice that you deserve. and enter a prison tomb of your own to see how you like it to live amongst four walls, stone walls, for the crimes that you commit. And I'm atheist, and I don't believe in hell. But if there ever was one, you belong there.
What monsters. And with us also is Iris Chaim, whose son, Yotam, bravely escaped Hamas captivity with two other Israelis, and tragically they were killed making their way back
There's
to our
Elon
lives.
Musk, a sellout.
We have with us also the families of American hostages. They're here.
Hope you see them. They're a prick. They're a tender. When you should be fucking booing.
The pain these
It
families...
really is amazing to me, and I don't want to repeat myself, but my God, all these people basically clapping, taking your tax dollars. And by the way, you know, rents are going through the fucking roof. Everything is going through the roof. And meanwhile, these people are using your tax money, your percentage of your tax money, to give to this piece of shit. And he's not the only piece of shit. You have King Salman and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, two people who also belong in The Hague. They also get our tax money. Egypt, which is a large percentage of our tax money. In fact, Egypt gets more money than Israel. Egypt, I think, gets more money than any country on the face of the earth. Don't get me started on that country and their corruption for decades. And it just angers me to no end to see people vote for these people. It really grinds my gears. I can't believe we have that many dumb people in this country who still continue to vote for these people and think it's going to work out in their favor. How is it now? How you doing at the poll? You feel good pulling that pulley, putting in your vote through pencil or pen, pushing that button? Do you feel accomplished? You're an empty vessel. You've left your empathy. And now you're filled with ideology, whether it's politics, religion, racism, sexism. These things don't define you. What defines you is here and here.
have endured is beyond words. I met with them again yesterday, and I promised them this: I will not rest until all their loved ones are home, all of them.
And you will kill every single Palestinian in the process of doing so. And you wonder why they haven't released the hostages. It would be suicide if they did.
As we speak, we're actively engaged in intensive efforts to secure their release, and I'm confident that these efforts can succeed. Some of them are taking place right now. I want to thank President Biden for his tireless efforts on behalf of the hostages and for his efforts to the hostage families as well.
A lot of blood on Joe Biden's hands. He's in 3 wars currently, the most since the Bush administration.
I thank President Biden for his heartfelt support for Israel after the savage attack on October 7th. He rightly called Hamas sheer evil. He dispatched 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East to deter a wider war.
Sheer evil. If Hamas is sheer evil, which they are, they go by the Wahhabi ideology. What is Israel? What is the Israeli government? I mean, the Israeli government has approximately killed 3 times the amount of people. In fact, probably 10 times the amount that Hamas did on October 7th. And if he wants to compare October 7th to 9/11, well, Israel just committed a Holocaust. if you want to compare disasters. It's not anti-Semitic to point out the evils of the Israeli government. If you're a human being, if you have empathy, you will join me in denouncing this government under Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, look who he filled his cabinet with. A bunch of Israeli settlers who are worse than him, worse than the Likud party, which is what Netanyahu is a part of, the far right party full of nationalists. Well, when you have Bezalel Smotrich and Ben Gvir and Eli Cohen, all a bunch of religious nutjobs who call for the end of the life of every single Muslim. That's imagine the U.S. Congress basically going on TV and basically saying we need to kill every single Arab person on the face of the earth. You would have a huge outcry of criticism. We need to get rid of these people. Well, why are they supported when it comes to Jewish leaders, Israeli leaders? Why are they being supported in the U.S. Congress? Is it because Israel gives them millions and millions of dollars? People like Lindsey Graham and Steny Hoyer and Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Lindsey Graham, who all receive over $1 million. In fact, Biden, I think, receives $4 million. Steny Hoyer, $1.1 million. Lindsey Graham, $1.1 million. Richie Torres, another sellout. In fact, Richie Torres is a Bronx district leader, and he talks more about Israel than his own district. He's a sellout. Just like every single body who accepts a dollar from the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, also known as AIPAC, anybody who takes money from these fucking ghouls is a sellout. You have sold your soul to the devil himself, which is right here in front of you. And there are many devils. They're not just Israeli. They're in Saudi Arabia. They're in Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Israel. They're in other countries too. Russia, Ukraine, North Korea. We're not talking about the people here. We're talking about government leaders. And I'm pretty sure almost every single government, almost, is corrupt and evil to the core. Some more than others. But the people asked for it. Now you know why people like me don't vote. And that's a growing minority. We're not the problem. The people who vote are the problem because you keep these people in power.
And he came to Israel to stand with us during our darkest hour, a visit that will never be forgotten. President Biden and I have known each other for over 40 years. I want to thank him for half a century of friendship to Israel and for being, as he says, a proud Zionist. Actually, he says a proud Irish-American Zionist.
There you go. Biden doesn't hide the fact. Listen, Biden doesn't hide the fact. He said it numerous times, and you can find the clips on YouTube, that he's a proud Zionist. Trump never said that. But fuck, Barack Obama never said that. George Bush. In fact, two presidents that I know of in my lifetime, George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, and Barack Obama, were really not too friendly with Israel. Tentative relationship, but not too friendly. And Obama was a mass murderer. So was both of the Bush family. But when you have slaves like Joe Biden and Bill Clinton and Gerald Ford, slaves to the Israeli dollar, that means looking the other way, and the rest of the Congress, the majority of them, slaves to the Israeli dollar, to corporate dollars, to foreign policy dollars. Meanwhile, you're more worried about putting food on the table. These people are basically putting more food on the table because they have the money to do so. You don't. Where's our money going? To the coffers at the Pentagon, the Department of State, the Department of the Treasury, to AIPAC, to the Saudi lobby, to rich donors across the world, to the private military industrial complex, to the oil and banking industry. That's where it's going. And you people need to band together and rise up, or else it's going to be too late. And right now, we're in the process of destroying ourselves because we think that flying different color flags of the political parties is basically separating us for the good. Well, that's exactly where they want you. They want you fighting each other instead of them fighting against the both of you, because the winner of the two is going to be the loser against the government. You'll be labeled a terrorist. That's next. Because when there's no more enemies abroad, it's time to start wiping out whoever's left at the dinner table.
My friends, for more than 9 months, Israel's soldiers have shown boundless courage. With us today,
Courage. Yeah, courage. Courage. It takes courage to shoot an old man in the face with a 50 cal. It takes courage to shoot a young child in the head with a sniper's rifle. It takes great courage to do that. It takes courage to shoot an unarmed civilian population and say they're just Hamas supporters. 50,000 people, and there's one Hamas operative in the middle, kill them all. We think they're hiding them. In fact, imagine thinking that way, that 100 people just got together and said, let's hide this Hamas operative because we'll end up just committing suicide anyway. Just think, there is no thinking involved. There really isn't. They're slaughtering these people wholesale, and it's on purpose. And you're falling for it.
with us today is Lieutenant Avichai Reuven.
Oh, look, a terrorist.
Avichai is an officer in the Israeli paratroopers. His family immigrated to Israel from Ethiopia. In the early hours of October 7th, Avichai heard the news of Hamas's bloody rampage. He put on his uniform, grabbed his rifle, but he didn't have a car. So he ran 8 miles to the front lines of Gaza to defend his people.
Meanwhile, the Israeli IDF took 6 hours to respond to the initial attack by Hamas at the Jericho Wall. Why so long? Was it basically just to allow Hamas to come in and start killing people, taking hostages, and then respond? To give them the time so that you could overreact militarily? Isn't that what you do in Gaza City, in Khan Yunis? Cities that you basically raze to the ground time and time again throughout the last 70 years? By having them surrounded by military checkpoints like some giant prison? That's what you do in West Bank. That's what you did in Gaza City until they won their independence, and you basically gave them Hamas. You allowed them to grow. I'm not saying that Israel created Hamas. They didn't. They came from the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. Sheikh Yassin, the Al-Muslimin group, basically became Hamas later on. In response to what? The idea of shooting people at a military checkpoint. In fact, there's a story back in 1986. Israelis in a military jeep basically crashed into a checkpoint, killing a couple of people, and a bunch of people ran to Sheikh Yassin's house and told him not to respond yet. They were going to get the will of the people behind them. And so al-Muslimin became Hamas. And what did the IDF do? Basically give Yassin and his group money, weapons, so they could grow and build schools and mosques to spread the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, which later formed into a group called Hamas. Now, I'm not making this up. This is for the historical record. I don't have a history of speculating and using it as fact like some 9/11 truthers do, unfortunately. I like to be on point as much as I can. I may get it wrong here and there, but I'm just human. But I like to know that I am led by information and I process data and I present it to the people. That's what I like to do because power is in the people and information is power.
You heard that right. He ran 8 miles, came to the front lines, killed many terrorists, and saved many, many lives. Avichai,
Did he save any Palestinian lives? No. Probably
we
killed
all
them.
honor your remarkable
That's
heroism.
what the terrorists he's speaking of.
Another Israeli is with us here today, and he's stand up, right next to Avichai. This is Master Sergeant Ashraf al-Bakhiri.
You know, with this much support, it's no wonder that they can slaughter without impunity. And when you have this much support and backing from US Congress, you basically are allowed to commit any crime you want. And this is the reason why the US Congress commits every crime they want, like stealing from you, the American people, or killing you if you're an Arab.
Ashraf is a Bedouin soldier from the Israeli Muslim community of Raat. On October 7th, Ashraf too killed many terrorists. First, he defended his comrades in the military base, and he then rushed to defend the neighboring communities, including the devastated community of Kibbutz Be'eri. Like Ashraf, the Muslim soldiers of the IDF fought alongside their Jewish, Druze, Christian, and other comrades in arms with tremendous bravery.
You know, and it's no wonder you see these brown people, these brown Israelis, right? They're on the front lines. They don't care. You know, Zionists are huge racists. So they'll use African, Algerian, Israelis on the front lines of every battle. The white Israelis are the ones who are in the 3rd Battalion, the 3rd line of defense, maybe even the 2nd line of defense. But the 1st line of defense is always the colored Israelis. They don't realize that they're on the front lines, not because they're brave, but because the country doesn't give a shit about them. You're not really an Israeli. And according to religious Israelis, you're not a Jew. The Zionists, yeah, you are, temporarily. We'll use you. I'm not being racist here. This is a common theme in Israel when it comes to the military.
A third hero, Lieutenant Asa Sofer, is also here with us. Asa fought as an officer in the Tank Corps, and he was wounded in battle. He was wounded in battle while protecting his fellow soldiers from a grenade. He lost his right arm and the vision in his left eye. He's recovering, and incredibly, within a short time, Asa will soon return to active duty as a commander of a tank company. I just learned there is a fourth hero here, Lieutenant Jonathan Ben Hamel, who lost a leg in Gaza and continued to fight.
You know, you got to have empathy. If you're just, you got to have empathy for some of these people. Yeah, it's hard to do because they're committing murder. But they're also victims. They're victims of the government's lies, just like every other American soldier. And it takes real courage. I mean, rare courage to stand up and say, I'm not fighting. I'm not entering a war I know is illegal. Like Muhammad Ali, when he didn't enlist in the Vietnam War, he did time. That takes great courage. I mean, he's a public figure. And he knew the backlash he was going to receive, but he stood by his moral compound. And it's hard, especially if you're an Israeli. Most likely your family will probably abandon you. And then where do you go? Your country hates you. And it doesn't even have to be Israel. It could be any country. You know, these young men are victims of the government's lies and ideology, of human constructs that don't define the human community at all. And yet they're brainwashed, these people, into believing that their fellow man is the enemy. Meanwhile, the enemy is actually the people who are telling you it's your fellow man. You know, heaven forbid if the people ever rose up and basically abandoned their preconceived biases and stood together as one and then turned to the left and see the real enemy, which is in Congress. And I would like to see that in my lifetime. You know, I'm very much a pessimist, but that's waning because I'm starting to have hope. Because hope is better than pessimism. Now, yes, is it a pipe dream? Probably. But I'm going to give the effort. I lived the majority of my life as a depressed pessimist, hopeless pessimist. But recent events have led me to think otherwise, personally, for me. I got tired of the pessimistic nature of mine because it affected other people too, not just me. And that's the thing about pessimism. It's like cancer, like a disease. It spreads to others. It's very noticeable. How you affect other people's lives through your own is going to be up to you. Forgive them, but they know what they do.
My friends, these are the soldiers of Israel, unbowed, undaunted, unafraid.
You would be unafraid too if you had every weapon imaginable given to you by the United States against the people that can't legitimately defend themselves. Palestinians don't have a standing army. They have a terrorist group who are using the Palestinians.
As the Bible says, Am kelavi yakum. They shall rise like lions. They have risen like lions. The lion.
Ah, yes. Use the Old Testament. In fact, Jesus Christ, who you hate, but you don't even believe, basically said, violence begets violence. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Notice you won't ever quote Jesus Christ. In fact, when have you? And I'm speaking as an atheist. But I know good parables when I see it. There are good passages in the Bible, in the Quran, in the Torah. But you won't quote these scriptures. You'll quote the war scriptures of the Old Testament. Barbarians living in a barbaric, primitive time. Yet that's what you quote the most.
Lions of Judah, the lions of Israel.
What does Christ say? That one day the sheep will sleep next to the lions.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Living in peace.
the men and women of the IDF come from every corner of Israeli society, every ethnicity, every color, every creed, left and right, religious and secular. All are imbued with the indomitable spirit of the Maccabees, the legendary Jewish warriors of antiquity. With us today is Yechiel Leiter, the father of one of those Maccabees. Yechiel's father escaped the Holocaust and found refuge in America. As a young man, Yechiel moved to Israel and raised a family of 8 children. He named his eldest son Moshe after his late father. Moshe became
just like the old Israeli tribes in the Old Testament, whom slaughtered the Hittites, the Amalekites. Not just slaughtered them, but destroyed their livestock, destroyed their farms. Sounds familiar? That's exactly what's happening to the Palestinians here. A long, sordid history of death and destruction.
Exemplary officer in one of our elite commando units. He served with distinction for 2 decades while raising 6 beautiful children of his own. On October 7th, Moshe volunteered to return to combat. 4 weeks later, he was killed when a booby-trapped mine exploded in a tunnel shaft right next to a mosque. At his son's funeral, Yechiel said this: "If the state of Israel had not been established after the Holocaust, the image engraved in our collective memory would have been the photograph of that helpless Jewish boy in the Warsaw Ghetto holding his hands up in the air with Nazi rifles pointed at him. But because of the birth of Israel," Yechiel continued, "because of the courage of soldiers like my son Moshe, the Jewish people are no longer helpless in the face of our enemies."
Look how many stars there. Look at all of them.
Yechiel, please rise so we can honor your son's sacrifice. And I pledge to you and to all the bereaved families of Israel, some of whom are in this hall today, the sacrifice of your loved ones will not be in vain.
Tell me, when was the last time U.S. Congress invited a Palestinian to speak before the House? When was the last time the U.S. invited Mahmoud Abbas or Edward Said or any notable Palestinian laureate to come and speak about the crimes of the Israeli government? Never. Because Palestinians can't pay off U.S. Congress like Israel can. Israel's a poor country. Their money actually goes straight to themselves and to the U.S. Congress in the hopes of bills being passed in their favor. And they get it all the time. Not one time are they rejected. Not once when it comes to military aid or political protection. It's a racket. And that's what's going on here.
It will not be in vain, because for Israel, never again must never be an empty promise. It must always remain a sacred vow. And after October 7th, never again is now.
That's interesting. Let's go back a little bit here. Wonder who these two are. They're not clapping and they're sitting. I don't know who these are. I'm not too sure. But they deserve a lot of credit. I mean, it takes a lot of guts for like 1 to 2 people surrounded by 100 or 200 people who are supporting a fucking mass murderer. These two people basically are just looking at him with, disgust and contempt. Good for them, whoever they are.
My friends, defeating our brutal enemies requires both courage and clarity. Clarity begins by knowing the difference between good and evil. Yet incredibly, many anti-Israel protesters, many choose to stand with evil. They stand with Hamas. They stand with rapists and murderers. They stand with people who came into the kibbutzim, into a home. The parents hid the children, the 2 babies, in the attic, in a secret attic. They murder the families, the parents. They find the secret latch to the hidden attic, and then they murder the babies. These protesters stand with them. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Protesters are standing with the Palestinians that you're slaughtering wholesale. They're not standing up for Hamas. They're standing up for humanity in which you're destroying. War is never the end to terrorism. Tell me one time where war actually ended terrorism. It never did. It didn't in Iraq. It didn't in Afghanistan. It didn't in Syria. And it created in Libya terrorism where there wasn't before. Notice that the United States and coalition partners who engaged in warfare for these countries basically engaged warfare against countries' governments that were at war with terrorism? Muammar Gaddafi had an active arrest warrant, and he was the first leader in the world to have an active arrest warrant against Osama bin Laden. Bashar al-Assad was fighting against the terrorists. Now, I'm not saying these people are basically peaceful and loving dictators. They're not. They're dictators. They're murderous dictators. But the one good thing about them was that they curtailed Islamic fundamentalism. They tried anyway. Libya is now a wholesale slave market for the Islamic State and al-Nusra and other these ghoul groups funded by the CIA through the Timber Sycamore program. Thanks, Barack. Thanks, Israel. Thanks, Saudi Arabia. And thank you, Turkey and Jordan, who engaged in that operation where they funded and trained Islamic fundamentalists to help overthrow the Assad government, and the CIA failed. But they didn't fail in Libya. They didn't fail in Iraq. They got rid of Saddam Hussein, who had nothing to do with 9/11 and hated Osama bin Laden. And you failed in Afghanistan, a haven for Al Qaeda and Taliban. 20 years, the longest war in U.S. history. What did it prove? Nothing. $3.1 trillion wasted. American lives. Afghan lives destroyed, wasted, to the incompetence of the Department of Defense. Scumbags like Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, Lloyd Austin, Barack Obama, George Bush, Joe Biden. God, the list goes on and on and on. The failures of these administrations, unmitigated failures. The lives they have destroyed and affected, the money wasted, when you could have just spent it on the American people, on repairing the world instead of destroying it. It's disgusting. I think that's Kristen Cinema, little idiot.
They refuse to make the simple distinction between those who target terrorists and those who target civilians, between the democratic state of Israel and the terrorist thugs of Hamas. We recently learned from the National Security Director, U.S. Director of National Intelligence, that Iran is funding and promoting anti-Israel protests in America. They want to disrupt America. So these protesters burn American flags even on the 4th of July. And I wish to salute the fraternity brothers at the University of North Carolina who protected the American flag against these anti-Israel protesters.
Bunch of right-wing idiots basically are getting the applause here. The flag doesn't stand for us anymore. You know, the founding fathers would be really upset at this. And they have problems of their own, but basically, we allow the foreign government to basically run our government. That's what's happening here. And you know what? I could just really just end it right here because I didn't want to play the whole thing. But you get the gist of what's going on here. And look, you know, I'm probably going to come under a little bit of fire here. I'm not popular, so I'm going to get some criticism by people saying, well, you know, you're just an anti-Semite or you're an anti-Jew. I'm anti-evil. I speak about evil in the Arab world, and I'll speak against evil when it comes to the West. I criticize everybody. I praise very few, unfortunately. And in this case, I like to think that it is a human duty, not just a specific duty, but a human duty. People who have a moral backbone, who have the courage to speak out against this disgusting, despicable government run by this man, by this creature. I won't even call him a human being, but he is. He just rather choose to conduct evil as a form of good or under the banner of empathy. People are dying every day in Gaza, and nobody cares. Hardly anyone does in Washington. But we do have people speaking out. There are protests happening all over the world. People are getting tired. They're getting weary and frustrated at the American government, at governments of their home countries, who are basically siding with this Zionist entity that is basically just a criminal organization. And I warn you that if you think that Netanyahu is bad enough, what's coming after him is much worse. If you think Trump is bad enough, what's coming after him is much worse. If you think Biden is bad enough, what's coming after him is much worse. It seems that every single administration aligning with the Saudi Arabian government, with the Israeli government, with the US government, or with Great Britain, it gets worse and worse and worse until the point where the people are going to basically have enough. And then when we react, we're going to be labeled the terrorist. As you could see, this is what Netanyahu is saying about his own people who are protesting against the vile conduct of his administration. He's actually calling his own people Hamas supporters. What do you think he's going to call you who are not Israeli? I mean, the president under Joe Biden basically thinks that Palestinian supporters are traitors. Well, guess what? Kamala Harris likes to think that too. And if you think Trump is the better option, wait till you see what's coming up in his administration. A bunch of religious evangelical fanatics who have a close relationship with none other than Zionists. Do not vote. I implore you to protest as much as you can by making videos, writing articles. I always try to push the people who follow this channel to basically do their own content because your voice matters. Your thoughts in your head matter. What good is it up here if it's not coming out here or it's not being penned and being read by others? We need more voices because activism is the only way, whether it's street activism or online activism or a combination of both. But if you can't do street activism or if you can't do video, at least write something. Write something that is meaningful to humanity because humanity is what counts. Without it, we're nothing. All right. Thank you very much for watching this video. And basically, have a good night, everybody. And remember to keep in mind that it is our allies who are the enemies to humanity. Good night, everybody.